Dinozords. The Dino Zords were the Rangers' weapons of choice when Mighty Morphin Power Rangers first aired. 5 massive machines that defined what a Power Ranger Zord actually was for an entire generation of viewers. Kids watching those early episodes didn't see a temporary arsenal. They saw the permanent answer. Every toy commercial, every playground argument, every piece of merchandise confirmed the same assumption. These 5 Zords were here to stay. They were the hero's ultimate weapons and the primary symbols of the team, and young viewers believed they would remain exactly that for the rest of the show's entire run. Then Season 2 arrived, and Lord Zedd destroyed the Dinozords. The destruction played out without warning. The Dinozords anchored the Rangers' firepower during their debut season, the reliable answer to every monster attack, and then in Zedd's first major offensive against the Zord arsenal, they were simply gone. No farewell sequence, no last stand where the team fought them to the end. One moment the Dino Zords were the Rangers' guaranteed response to any threat, and the next they were wreckage scattered across a battlefield. Stripped of their power, removed from the roster with no path back. The loss hit young viewers hard, and it was supposed to. The Dino Zords had been marketed as the face of the franchise, and then a single season in, they were erased. Kids who had built their entire relationship with the show around those 5 dinosaurs got no warning and no replacement waiting in the wings. The sadness wasn't just about losing cool machines, it was the shock of watching something you believed was permanent get destroyed without ceremony on a show that had never previously suggested that kind of loss was even possible. That shock served a clear narrative purpose. The Dino Zords' destruction proved that nothing on the show was permanent. The Rangers could lose their weapons, their equipment could be destroyed, the symbols they relied on could vanish. None of it was safe. For a young audience watching a show that had previously operated on the assumption that the heroes always kept their signature gear, that lesson landed like a physical blow. It crossed a line that kids' action shows rarely crossed, and it refused to uncross it. The Dino Zords' destruction sits among the saddest losses the Power Rangers franchise has ever staged, and its influence echoes through every brutal Zord death that followed. Every later moment that hits with genuine emotional weight traces its lineage back to this one, the moment the show taught its audience that loss was actually possible. The Dino Zords were removed from active service after their destruction. The show had broken its own unwritten contract with its viewers, and there was no going back. Subscribe and tell us in the comments which Zord death you think was the most brutal. Let's get back into it. White Tigerzord. The White Ranger arrived as an answer to a problem Zordon had identified. Lord Zedd's attacks were escalating beyond what the existing Zord arsenal could handle, and the team needed something built specifically for a war that had already outgrown the original equipment. The White Ranger received the White Tigerzord as a 6th Zord, the 6th Thunderzord added to the arsenal during the escalating conflict. Where the Dino Zords had been the Ranger's original answer, the White Tigerzord was purpose-built for a fight the previous Zords couldn't win. The White Ranger summoned the White Tigerzord through Saba, a direct link that made the Zord feel like an extension of the pilot himself rather than a separate machine in the hangar. That integration gave the Tigerzord a level of personal connection the Dino Zords never had with the team, which is partly why what happened to it carried a different kind of weight. This wasn't just equipment lost, it was a weapon specifically designed for its pilot, destroyed before it ever had the chance to become what the Dino Zords had been to the audience. Rito Revolto attacked the White Tigerzord during his assault on Angel Grove. Rito was the kind of threat the White Ranger and the Tigerzord had been created to counter, and he tore through it with the same efficiency Lord Zedd had used against the Dino Zords. The attack on Angel Grove eliminated the Zord, and the loss carried the same brutal finality. The White Tigerzord was lost during the conflict. The Dino Zords had at least survived long enough to become symbols. The White Tigerzord never got that chance. Skeptics called it a rehash. The show had already proven that Zord destruction was possible by killing the Dino Zords, so destroying the White Tigerzord felt like a repeat of the same move. But that's exactly the point. The Dinozord destruction proved loss was possible once. The White Tigerzord's destruction proved it was a pattern. Each successive Zord death stripped away more of the arsenal that had defined the team and confirmed that nothing the Rangers called to the battlefield was guaranteed to survive. The White Tigerzord didn't just die, it reinforced the new rule the Dinozords had established. Permanence was no longer part of the deal. The Dinozords lasted an entire season and built genuine emotional investment before their end. The White Tigerzord arrived and was lost during the same season it debuted, before young viewers could form the same attachment they had with the Dino Zords. Was that the point? To keep the audience in a state where nothing was safe, not even the new replacement? The brief time between its debut and its loss is what makes the White Tigerzord's destruction rank among the most brutal. Galactabeasts. When one Zord is stolen and reforged, it costs the Rangers a single weapon. When 3 of them are captured, dismantled, and rebuilt as enemy machines, it costs them the memory of what they once were. The colonists believe the Galactabeasts perished in an explosion, only to be proven wrong a moment later when both the Zords and the Rangers emerged from the smoke. The Galactabeasts were discovered on an unnamed wild planet. Their 3 lost siblings had already paid the steepest possible price before the rebuild even began. That rebuild happened under Deviot. He took the broken bodies of several Galactabeasts, beings whose apparent destruction in that earlier great battle had been witnessed and mourned, and reforged them as weapons. The Centaurus Megazord rose from the Rhino's remains. The Stratoforce Megazord rose from the Phoenixes. The Zenith Carrier Zord rose from the Sharks. Each one a mechanical shell built directly from the wreckage of a living Galactabeast. The 3 did not return to fight alongside the Rangers. They returned as enemy Zords, and the death the Rangers had already accepted as final was precisely the condition that allowed Deviot to complete the conversion. That is the brutal mechanism at work. Their destruction was not a casualty of the war. It was the prerequisite for their corruption. The cost of those 3 was revisited in a later engagement when the Centaurus Megazord, the Rhino Galactabeast in its corrupted mechanical form, fired its cannon directly at the living Galactabeasts still fighting for the Rangers. The blast sparked and burst across them in blinding light. The 3 remaining Galactabeasts that had carried the fight forward were now being struck by the physical remains of the very beasts they had lost. After the city dome's impact, the Galactabeasts were seen to have survived. But survival does not undo what Deviot had already done to the 3 that were already lost. The 5 main Galactabeasts, Lion, Condor, Gorilla, Wolf, and Wildcat, held the line throughout, their presence proof that not every Galactabeast fell to the conversion, but their 3 lost siblings were already gone, already rebuilt, already deployed as weapons against everything their former allies believed in. The evil Zords that entered the fight were not separate creatures pulled from some unrelated arsenal. They were the 3 lost Galactabeasts, reassembled into mechanical forms, every trace of what had made them living beings overwritten by machinery, deployed against their former allies with no memory of the pact they once honored, Megaforce Zords. If losing 3 Galactabeasts to an enemy who reforges them into weapons is catastrophic, facing an enemy Zord purpose-built to dismantle every Zord the Rangers possess, systematically, without a single misstep, before any of them can land a decisive blow, is something else entirely. An enemy Megazord appeared in the Super Megaforce series that overpowered the Rangers' Zords. The Rangers had nothing that could stop it. The individual Zords failed, combined forms failed, every angle they tried, every formation they committed to. The Armada Megazord was already 3 moves ahead, its design anticipating and countering each response before the Rangers could fully execute it. A Zord built to dodge every hit, to absorb and power through every assault, to finish with a strike as devastating as the Armada Galactic Strike. This was not a machine built for a campaign of grinding attrition. It was built for a single confrontation with the Rangers at their absolute peak, and it performed exactly as designed. The detail that researchers keep returning to is the Armada Megazord's singular combat profile. A Zord designed with that level of precision, agility to dodge every attack, firepower to punch through every defense, a finishing move capable of ending any engagement in one stroke, was not designed to lose by accident. The design itself points directly to intent. The Armada Megazord was built as the threshold test, a threat massive enough, devastating enough, and overwhelming enough to force the Rangers into the one response that had never been required before, combining every legendary Zord they had ever gathered into the ultimate legendary Megazord for the first and only time. It was engineered not to conquer the Rangers, but to create the exact conditions where the ultimate legendary Megazord had to be deployed. A weapon designed to lose precisely in the way that would produce the Rangers' most spectacular victory: Thunderzords. Lord Zedd's monster Parantis Head didn't just seize control of the Dinozords and the Dragon Zord during Mighty Morphin Season 2, it took machines the Rangers themselves had never built, had never controlled, and weaponized them against the people who were supposed to pilot them. Zordon and Alpha 5 had created the Thunderzords by transforming the Dinozords using the power of thunder, a process that excluded Tommy's Dragon Zord entirely, which is why Tommy received the White Ranger Tigerzord instead. The Thunderzords united to form the Thunder Megazord. They combined with Tommy's Tigerzord to form the Mega Tigerzord, which used the Firebird Thunderzord as a shield. Zordon created Tor, the Shuttle Zord, by combining a green crystal with the turtle, and Tor carried the Thunderzords and Tigerzord in shuttle mode as part of the Thunderzord assault team formation. The Thunderzords and Tigerzord combined with Tor to form the Thunder Ultrazord. Here's where it gets worse. The Rangers didn't lose those Zords in a battle they fought and lost. They lost them because a monster overwrote their control codes while they were still inside the cockpits. And that is the small version of the problem. The exclusion that gave Tommy the White Tigerzord also made his Dragon Zord uniquely vulnerable, untouched by the protective magic that created the Thunderzords, sitting exposed, and Parantis Head took it without breaking stride. And before anyone assumes Tommy got off easy, the White Tigerzord was never a replacement. The White Tigerzord existed because his original Zord couldn't be transformed, which meant it had no place in the Thunder Fleet, which meant it sat outside the blast radius, not by design, by accident. The Thunderzords were a story of Rangers building a new arsenal and watching Lord Zedd destroy it. That leaves the Thunderzord's entire existence structured around a single brutal contradiction. Zordian and Alpha 5 built them from the Dinozords using thunder itself, and the Thunder Megazord, the Mega Tigerzord with the Firebird Thunderzord as its shield, the Thunder Ultrazord with Tor, the Shuttle Zord, at its core. Every combination the show spent multiple episodes setting up existed for exactly as long as it took Parantis Head to reach the control panel. Their greatest strength, the transformation that made them Thunderzords, was also the mechanism of their loss. They were destroyed not despite being Zordon and Alpha 5's finest work, but because of it. Red Ranger Zeo Zord. The Zeo Zord series, including the Red Ranger Zeo Zord. In the Mighty Morphin era, the Zords were destroyed and replaced several times before the Zeo transition even began. After the Alien Rangers miniseries, everything exploded, literally and narratively, and Power Ranger Zeo introduced new Zords derived from Koriki Sentai O-Ranger as part of the franchise's hard break into a new season. The Red Ranger Zeo Zord was one of 5 Zords powered by the Zeo Crystal, capable of combining into the Zeo Megazord and the Zeo Battlezord. The Red Ranger's Zeo Zord died not in the fiction's final chapter, but at the moment the show was being rebuilt from the outside. The Zeo Crystal had been Zordon's great project, protected through years of Rita Repulsa's attacks, hidden, sought after, fought over, and the Zord built from it was the physical anchor of all that protection. They erased the crystal's most visible manifestation at the exact moment the Rangers were trying to figure out what came next. People assumed the Zeo Zords were retired together, all 5 of them, in some grand final battle against the Machine Empire's greatest weapon. That's not what happened. It wasn't a sacrifice play. It wasn't a heroic last stand. Turbo Zords. The Zeo Zords at least got a clean swap, unlocked, deployed, and then retired in orderly fashion. The Turbo Zords never got that dignified transition. They were dumped, abandoned, and carved up so ruthlessly that the show never even gave them a funeral. Nothing ever hinted they'd be replaced by an upgrade or improved tech. They were obliterated because that was the only way to keep up with the villain's escalation. So here's the rundown. 5 unique Turbo Zords were handed off to the Rangers, each combining into the Turbo Megazord. Each brought something that the franchise hadn't done before. The Eagle Zord could actually fly, putting air support on the table. Shark Zord was purpose-built for underwater combat, no vague hand-waving. This was the only Zord for deep-sea missions. Cat Zord had claws vicious enough to rip through steel, a clear answer to ground-based threats. That level of specialization was rare. But the stakes jumped when Divatox got hold of stolen Ranger tech and built the Divazords, direct rivals tailor-made to exploit every weakness. The Divazords didn't just mimic abilities, they outmaneuvered, outgunned, and forced the Rangers' hand at every turn. Are you telling me these Zords, uniquely engineered for versatility and dominance, were scrapped just because the team changed uniforms? The question hangs over the entire season. If the Turbo Zords are so formidable, why destroy them instead of turning them over, refitting them, or even storing them for future use? The answer came in the final battle. Once Divatox launched her Divazords, the Rangers systematically destroyed each one, matching them blow for blow and leaving nothing to salvage. There was no handover, no passing of the baton, just total annihilation. The Eaglezord's flight didn't save it, Sharkzord sank with no escape, and Catzord's claws never saw another fight. It was as if their value got erased the second the Rangers moved on. The official explanation is textbook. The story calls for a fresh start, a new team, and new Zords, so the old ones must go. Simple. But that logic only covers the surface. It doesn't explain the decision to destroy Zords that still outperformed half the arsenal in the next era, or why they were never referenced again even as relics. It doesn't cover the fact that Divatox reverse-engineered Divazords forced a situation the writers couldn't simply ignore. The destruction wasn't a neat retirement, it was an erasure, triggered by villain escalation and a narrative need to sever ties. The only truth that sticks, the Turbo Zords weren't just retired, they were wiped out to end their story before it could haunt the next one. Astro Megazord. If the Turbo Zords got erased to keep the plot from breaking, the fate of the Astro Megazord is even quieter but harder to defend. With a saber, shield, and blaster on hand, and the ability to transform with the Astro Megashuttle into a dedicated Sky Warrior, it was forged for battles that stretched beyond the usual ground skirmish. Then, they pushed the envelope even further. Combining it with the Delta Megazord formed the Astro Delta Megazord, a configuration that doubled down on firepower. Code 541 on the Astro Morpher was the key to activating it, and once deployed, it could serve not just as a war machine, but as an emergency base, outlasting even after the Space Rangers retired. When the team transitioned, the Megazord's legacy endured until the Astro Megaship was destroyed, alongside Alpha 6, Bulk, and Coroni stepping into the Pink Galaxy Ranger role. The Astro Megaship and Megazord were evidence of legacy integration, not abandonment. So what would it take for the standard explanation to hold up? This Zord was just outclassed, so it was mothballed. The answer is cold, because that never happened. The Astro Megaship, along with the Zord, ended up being destroyed due to the Galaxy Rangers needing to self-destruct the Astro Megaship in order to take down their enemies. The conditions for a neat retirement were never met. Its legacy as the Cobalt Warrior of the Sky ended not with an upgrade, but with total destruction. The fact that it served as the base for a second Ranger team only underscores the loss. There's no skating around what the timeline shows. The Astro Megazord was wiped out so decisively the only conclusion left is that its story ends when its original role as a bridge between teams finally gets severed. Lightspeed Megazord. But where the Astro Megazord represented a fusion of two vessels operating in tandem, the Lightspeed Megazord drew its power from 5 distinct Zords, each piloted by a separate Lightspeed Ranger, combining into a single weapon that would meet its end in the series' final battle against Diabolico and Olympius. The Lightspeed Megazord was formed from the 5 rescue Zords, each one a specialized vehicle in its own right, merging together under the command of the Lightspeed Rangers to create their primary weapon against Queen Banshira's demonic forces. It served as the team's cornerstone throughout their campaign against the Demon Queen and her army, the mechanical embodiment of 5 pilots working in perfect synchronization. The foe that destroyed it possessed both incredible strength and cunning, pushing the Megazord and its pilots to a breaking point that no amount of coordination could overcome. The series finale battle against Queen Banshira brought everything to a head. The Lightspeed Rangers committed their Megazord to the fight with everything they had. The 5 rescue Zords fused together into the Megazord's towering frame. Ready to deliver the decisive blow. Queen Banshira countered with raw, overwhelming power, her assault tearing into the Megazord with a violence that no previous encounter had approached. The destruction came with a blinding flash and a thunderous roar, and when the light faded and the sound cut out, the Megazord was gone. Its pieces were scattered across the landscape, the fused Zords torn cleanly apart and left strewn across the terrain they had once defended as one unit. The scale of that final loss is what defines it as a death rather than a defeat. A damaged Megazord can be repaired. A scattered Megazord, its component Zords wrenched apart at the join points and flung across the battlefield, represents something closer to an absolute end. The pilots survived, but the machine that had been their greatest weapon and their most visible symbol as a team was gone. Not captured, not buried, not sealed away, but literally torn to pieces and left behind. Time Force Megazord. The Time Force Megazord faces a different kind of ending entirely, one that comes not from an enemy's fist, but from the fabric of time itself, and it's an ending the Rangers can't undo because it's already happened in their future. The Time Force Megazord is summoned when the 5 Time Flyers arrive from the future to combine, and it can form 3 distinct configurations, each optimized for a different kind of combat. In jet mode, it achieves incredible speed and sturdiness, built for rapid transit across the battlefield. In blue mode, it trades raw power for greater agility and a blaster suited to ranged engagements. In mode red, it mounts a saber and shield for direct, heavy combat. It can further combine with the Time Shadow to form the Shadow Force Megazord, layering even more firepower onto a platform already capable of handling the era's most dangerous threats. According to the Watch Mojo article, it was just a shame that the Megazord couldn't stay in the present, a phrase that carries the quiet weight of inevitability because the Megazord didn't just break in the present and get left behind. It was destroyed in a future that already existed, a casualty of a timeline it had been built to protect.